onto our backs. As we begin our practice, we'll begin with some breath work. We're going to place both of our hands on the belly. We want to try to do all of our breathing through the nose if we're able. If you've got allergies, or if you've got a cold, I'd rather you just breathe. But if you're able to breathe through the nostrils, let's do that. Inhaling deeply, exhaling fully. We're going to start to move into what's called three-part breath. As we inhale, we want to think about filling that belly, and you should feel that move with your hands on top. You'll feel a movement of the belly. Don't try to suck that in. Let it fill. Let it just become big like a balloon, and then go ahead and fill up higher to the bottom of the rib cage. And then we want to feel our breath fill all the way to the top of the chest. Then those same three places, we're going to exhale, exhaling from the top of the chest to the bottom of the rib cage and the belly. Again, we're filling from the belly, the bottom of the rib cage, the top of the chest, emptying the top of the chest, the bottom of the rib cage, and the belly. Continuing to breathe like this. We want to breathe with some purpose here and really try to expand our lung capacity. If you watch a baby breathe, you can see not just their chest rise, but you can see their belly rise. And over time, that usually changes. We start to see chest breathing coming. But we want that breath to come all the way down from the belly. So it's something that we practice. Another thing that we practice in our sessions is posture. In order to breathe well, we need to stand well so that everything is lined up. So we'll be working on that today. Continue to breathe like this as we talk a little bit about Tamar.
When we open up our Bibles to Genesis 38, we find the story of a woman named Tamar. Tamar lived about 400 years before Moses, which means there was no 10 Commandments, no book of Leviticus. But that doesn't mean that people didn't have a sense of right and wrong. There were social and moral laws at that time also. One of those laws was referred to as the Levirate system. Now, this was a really unique system that took care of the widows of its time. It was sort of their social security that kept them from being socially and economically disadvantaged. So it became not only a social obligation, but a legal one. It was practiced not just by the Hebrew community, but by surrounding nations also, such as the Assyrians and the Hittites. Under any other circumstances, the pieces of the Levirate system were actually forbidden. It's very unique. What happened in a Levirate marriage was that when a man died, leaving his widow childless, his brother was responsible to provide an heir. This would help the widow be secure and ensure that the line continued. With that in mind, we can take a look at Tamar, a woman who was twice widowed. And she wakes up every day, the Bible says, every day, putting on her widow's clothing, all in an expectation on Judah, who has no intention of fulfilling his obligation to her. Now, Judah was a Hebrew man. He came to marry a Canaanite woman. They had 3 sons. The oldest son was named and he married Tamar. But was evil, and the Lord took him. So, in keeping with the Levirate law, Judah sent his second son, Onan, to give Tamar an heir. But Onan is not interested. He exercises birth control when they have intercourse to ensure that there is no heir. Now, this was a really greedy thing for him to do. By making sure that there was no heir, that means there was more inheritance for him. In addition, it showed that he had absolutely no concern for Tamar. He was leaving her, basically, like in our terms today, taking her social security check away from her. And think of the lack of dignity he's showing to Tamar here. He is using her for intercourse, but giving her no security in exchange for that. So, the Lord considers it evil, and he takes the second son also. Judah's got 1 son left here, and he sends Tamar home to her family and says, just wait for Sheila to grow up, and then I'll send him to you. But he has no intention of giving his 3rd son to Tamar, risking his life after he's lost 2 already. A lot of time passes. Judah's wife dies, and Tamar becomes aware of the fact that she has been left the victim of a broken obligation. So she takes action. She knows where Judah's going to be. She sets herself up under disguise as a prostitute. Judah falls for the trap, doesn't realize that it's Tamar that he has slept with. And when he finds out that his daughter-in-law is pregnant, he is angry. He says, "Bring her out. Let her be burned." And then she gives him evidence that it's actually his child. And he realizes that he's been wrong. He says, "She's more righteous than me." Now, God saw Tamar in the midst of this long period of putting on her widow's clothes every day, just because of a broken obligation to her, of having that lack of security. God saw her in the midst of that, and he sees us in the midst of our pain too. As you continue to breathe here, I want you to think through who might be a Tamar in your life. Is there someone who's maybe feeling forgotten or let down, and they need some extra love and attention and encouragement from you? Think through a way to meet the Tamar in your life's need.
Let's draw one knee in towards the chest, using it to just kind of roll up. Then we're going to come onto all fours. We can come either to a flat hand, or if this bothers the wrists, don't do it. You can come into fist for wrists here, stacking everything up. But let's make sure that we've got the wrists underneath of the shoulders, the knees underneath of the hips, and we're going to move into some cat-cow as we start to warm up the spine. Let's inhale, dropping the belly while keeping some core control here as the heart comes forward. And then we're going to reverse this, drawing the spine up towards the ceiling, tucking the tailbone, letting the head drop. As we inhale, we come into cow. As we exhale, we come into cat, and our attention is to the spine. We want to create space down the back of the spine as we come into cat, and down the front of the spine as we come into cow. We're reducing all that compression in the spine. Think about each and every vertebrae getting a little space created between it. As we come into cow, even think about extending out the neck so we can activate the thyroid and the parathyroid to help our metabolism. When we do that, let's make sure that we're not crunching the neck up, but that we're extending the neck out. We can think about the shoulder blades spreading nice and wide as we come into cat. And then reversing that as we feel an openness in the chest coming into cow. Let's take those big toes together, widening the knees, sinking the hips back, drawing the arms forward and the head towards the mat. I'm going to lift my head a little bit just so you can hear me. But as we come into this child's pose, let's think about how this feels comfortable, doesn't it? I think it's because we were born to worship. Let's take a moment here for adoration, praising God for who he is. Adoration is a little different than Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, we praise God for what he's done. Adoration is about who he is, a God of grace, of mercy, of justice. An omniscient God who knows everything, sees everything. When we don't know what to do, thank goodness he knows everything, and we can come to him with all of our concerns, and he asks us to. And we can lift our head, taking our hands over to the right, drawing our left foot up, framing it, pushing off, lifting up here, hands meet, coming to heart center. Let's take our hips back into chair. And now we're going to start to think about creating space. You're going to hear that a lot in a practice with me about where we're creating space. We're creating space between the hips and the belly button here. Our hips are going to stay forward, and our belly button is going to rotate as we reach behind us, finding a focal point back here. So we were warming the spine first through extension and flexion in our cat-cow. Now we're giving our spine some rotation here. The hips forward, the belly button back. Still breathing here. One movement, one breath. Maybe this bothers our shoulders a little bit to come this high. We can lower that a little bit. I like to go that high when I can because it feels very worshipful to me, but we can come down like this. The important thing is that space we're creating as we pull the belly button behind us as we continue to warm the spine. Let's sink back into chair. Extending our arms up, taking time for a prayer of thanksgiving, thanking God for what he's done. Maybe it's for a friend or a family member. Maybe it's for somebody you don't even know, the author of the book that you're reading. Continuing to breathe. Let's continue to warm the spine here, taking our hands to heart center, rising, circling our arms up overhead. We're going to reach directly overhead with the right and come back down. Inhaling as we reach directly overhead with the left and coming back down. Notice that I'm not leaning from one side to the other. This is the beginning of our practice. So if we were to lean to one side, we're going to cause some compression on that opposite side. And what we're doing is trying to get some lateral extension here, which just means that we're creating space in the spine down the side. Later in our practice, once we've got that spine nice and warm, which we're almost there, then we can go into that where we come more to one side. But right now, just reach overhead, kind of like a junior higher when they hit that growth spurt and they can finally reach the doorway and they're jumping up. Think about reaching for that doorway. And back to neutral. Let's come down. Hanging here, a full release of the upper body. Let that head hang down. Maybe it feels good to grab behind the legs here in this forward fold. We've got a soft knee to protect the back. We want our feet to be right underneath of the hips. Continuing to breathe. Purposeful with every inhale, every exhale, feeling a release of the hamstrings. We never want to feel pain. We back off a little bit if we're feeling pain. Now pushing off with the knees, let's circle back up. Hands meet, coming to heart center. Let's talk about mountain. It's a really important pose because the more often we practice mountain, the more aware we become of our posture in everyday life. We need to stand well in order to breathe well. And the respiratory system has an impact on so many other systems of the body, the digestive system, the nervous system, cardiovascular system. So it's really important that we stand well to breathe well. So let's start by building a foundation from the feet. Think about that feeling when you're just about to jump off the ground. There's a giving and a receiving here where we've got the 3 pressure points of the feet, 2 in the front, 1 back at the heel that are pressing down into the floor. But at that same time, we're feeling our arches lift. As we travel up the legs, we've got a soft knee. We don't want to lock out those legs at all. And we're not overly pushing the hips forward. We want a natural curve, but at the same time, we want to try to have the hips over the ankles, our shoulders over the hips. Notice my forearms are facing forward. That's because if we just let them hang like this, suddenly we're going into flexion, and we spend way too much time in flexion in our culture, bent over our phones mostly, but also books, computers, everything else that we do. So when we bring those forearms forward, it brings us into that place of extension, and we're going to be able to breathe so much better in some extension. We want to feel like our head is lifted. Maybe imagine there's a string being pulled through the spine, up through the head. As we lift that neck up, the vertebrae of the neck are much smaller than down at the bottom of the back. And so it's really easy sometimes to think about just dropping that head back. But think about how that's going to crunch all those vertebrae as we do our whole practice today. But really lift the head. Think about creating that space. Breathe. Let's inhale up, exhaling forward fold, stepping back into plank. We've got our hands underneath of the shoulders. We've got straight legs behind us, or we've got an option to modify here by coming down to the knees. We're letting gravity do some work here as it pulls us down. We're stabilizing, and that is making us stronger. Breathing. Holding the movement. Never holding the breath. And now we can push back into down dog, bringing the tailbone nice and high, floating it up towards the ceiling. Our fingers are spread wide, creating an L with the thumb on the first finger. Our head is hanging between the biceps. Let's just alternate, kind of stepping out those heels, feeling a release of any tension in the back of the legs. And as we're in this position, head down, we've got the head below the heart, which puts us in an inversion. It's a awakening pose. We're breathing. Now let's shift forward once more to plank. Feeling that strengthening of the core. Once again, we've got that option to drop to the knees. And if you do drop to the knees, let's take advantage of this chance to just twist out the feet, getting out any snap, crackle, and pops from the ankles. We've got a soft elbow here. And let's shift back into child's pose once more. Head hanging down. Our head weighs about 11 pounds, which is like a bowling ball. And holding up our head all day keeps the nervous system slightly active. So if we can just kind of release that, it is great for the nervous system. And now we're going to shift forward to that modified plank position, and keeping the arms nice and close to the body. Let's come down no lower than the elbows, feeling that strength of the upper body, coming back up, and then shifting back into child's pose. Let's do a couple of this, flowing as we come forward to that modified plank, dropping down to the elbows, no lower, and coming back into child's pose. One movement, one breath, still trying to draw that breath all the way down to the bottom of the belly, filling it like a big balloon. Maybe imagining all of the blood capillaries at the very bottom of the lungs and see if we can reach those as we breathe. The next time we come down into this modified crocodile, let's stay here for a breath or two. Inhaling, exhaling, pushing off, inhaling up, exhaling, forward fold. Then we're gonna step back nice and far with that right foot, turning the foot so that the heel of the left comes to the center of the right. We want a good 90-degree angle here. We're moving into warrior two. As we're in warrior two, our arms are not just up, they're active. We're reaching from wall to wall. Our gaze is over that middle finger. As long as our knee health allows, we've got a 90-degree angle here with the left leg. And if we peek over, we want to be able to see that big toe because the knee is pointing towards the second toe, protecting the knee. We want to open up the torso towards that long edge of the mat. And we're breathing shoulders down away from the ears, this pose of strength. Standing strong as a child of God. Standing strong in his promises. One of my favorites is draw near to God and he will draw near to you, from James 4. Make your yoga practice an opportunity to draw near to him in some silence. And to worship him not just with our minds, but with our body. We can extend that left arm up, leaning in, making sure that that torso is open to that long edge of the mat, and we lift. We want to feel this down the side of the spine, an exalted warrior. We've still got that 90-degree angle with the left leg, so long as it doesn't cause any pain. If you've got pain, back off just a little bit. Breathe in, reach towards that corner of the room. Worship doesn't just happen behind a church door. Worship can be done by the way we work, the way we live, the way we spend our time. And here in our yoga practice, just lift your gaze high in worship of our Creator. Really reaching, creating that space down the side of the spine. And now let's straighten out that left leg, cartwheeling the arms so that we draw the left down, the right overhead. Kind of like we're opening for a great big hug here as we reach those fingertips as far apart away from each other as we can. The left way down, the right way up. I once heard it described as keeping a snake away from a bird. That's, if you know me very well, a little poetic for me, but it is a really good analogy. We're creating that space between the right hand and the left, really stretching them apart, opening up the torso towards the side of the mat. Let's draw our hands down, turning that rear foot so that all 10 toes are facing the front of the mat. We want to feel like we're standing kind of on railroad rails here. Head hanging down, chest and abdominals resting on that front leg, feeling a good stretch of the hamstrings. Maybe it's a little tough to come to the floor here. We can come to the calf, which is actually going to help us work on our balance a little bit. Or the ankle, or maybe you'd like to grab a block, have the hands at the block, but relax that head, let the chest and abdominals just rest on that front leg. Now we can really plant that left foot into the ground, lifting that right leg behind us with a flexed foot, opening up the torso to the long edge of the mat, standing half moon. Use a block here with that left hand if you'd like. Let's find a focal point. We want to try to bring the back of the head in line with the hips. We want to reach upward with that right hand. Breathing. And we can drop that leg. Let's come into forward fold here. Inhaling up. Hands meet. Coming to heart center. Let's stabilize on that left foot. Finding a focal point. As we move into standing pigeon, we're going to lift that right knee. And maybe we're going to stay right here, which is very strengthening to that left leg. Or we can cross that right leg over the left, sinking the hips back, taking our hands in what we call in yoga Anjali Mudra. Noticing that heat between the hands, keeping the foot flexed. Anytime we flex the foot, it's going to help protect all the tissues under the knee. And we breathe. When we fall out of a balance pose, we just get back in. You can kind of be happy about that because you found that place that's challenging for you, and that challenging place is where we can change. The easy places in life don't really change us. It's the challenges. And let's step that out. Inhaling up, exhaling forward fold. Stepping back nice and far with that left foot as we move onto the other side, turning that foot so that we've got the heel of the right, even with the midfoot of the left. Taking our gaze over the middle finger, we've got the shoulders down away from the ears, reaching wall to wall, not just lifting our arms, but active reaching. Let's take some time here for supplication. In Philippians, it says, do not worry about anything, but pray about everything. That's a lot of absolutes there. It doesn't say some things. It says not to worry about anything, pray about everything. Whatever's on your heart right now, let's take a moment to pray about it. And then we can flip up that right hand, leaning into it, making sure that torso is open to the long edge of the mat and coming up nice and high overhead here. Breathing as we reach towards the corner of the room. Feeling that space being created down the side of the spine with lateral extension. And we can straighten out that right leg, cartwheeling those arms. We've got our left arm overhead, our right down. We can press that arm into the leg. Soft knees. Even though we've got a straight leg here, we do want to have a soft knee. Opening that torso up towards that long edge of the mat. Let's release those hands down, turning the rear foot so that all 10 toes face the front of the mat or in line with the hips. Soft knees to protect the low back. We can have our hands at the calf, the ankle, or the floor. Chest and abdominals resting on that front leg. Breathing. Put as much of a bend into this knee as you need to protect your low back. I'm doing a little more than I usually do today. We have days where we've maybe sat a lot and then those hamstrings are kind of tight. Or maybe this is a day where we can advance. If that's the case, just push those hips back a little bit and then you can advance here. Breathing nice and deep all the way down to the belly. Let's lift the toes to make sure we've got a nice firm foundation here, then plant them back down, taking all of our weight to that right foot. Opening up to the side of the mat, flexing the left foot, maybe grabbing a block. Reaching upward with that left hand, balancing, breathing. Balancing half moon. And we can drop that leg, inhaling up. Hands meet, coming to heart center. As we move back into standing pigeon, let's stabilize on that left foot, planting it into the ground. Kind of like a tree that can move around, but it's planted nice and tight. Let's lift that left leg, crossing it over, sinking the hips back. So this is a hip opener, but on top of that, this balancing leg is being strengthened, not just in those muscles that you always hear about. You know, we think a lot about strengthening our glutes and our quadriceps. But who thinks about strengthening their peroneus brevis and the peroneus longus? But all those other small muscles of the leg are really important, especially if you live in Wisconsin like I do and you deal with ice. They really help stabilize us and keep us safe. It's important to strengthen those too, and these balancing exercises do that. Finding a focal point will help us balance. Breathing, being very intentional with our breath. When I fall out of the pose in the videos, I have no intention of changing that because I want you to see that when you fall out, you get back in. And we can step that out. Let's inhale up, exhaling forward fold. We're going to step back once more with the left, opening up to the long edge of the mat. And then we're going to walk our hands forward for a wide-legged down dog, pushing the hips back. So this is very similar to a straddle, but it's not the same. A straddle, we've got our hips in line with the heels, and we've got our arms right below us, either to the forearms, the hands, or a block. With this, we've got this extended arm, which I think feels great to the upper body. I like pressing the hips backward here. We've got a soft knee. And we breathe. Let's take some time here for a prayer of confession. Really search your heart here. I hope most of us, if something was brought to our attention by a friend that we'd maybe hurt them in some way, that we would want to confess that sin. However, there's sometimes that we just don't even realize we've done something because we never take the time to get quiet with the Lord and search our hearts. Search your heart now and confess anything that is standing in the way of your relationship with Him today. He promises if we confess our sins, He's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And now we can bring those arms to a more supportive position, just dropping to the knees. We're going to come back onto our hands and knees, moving into either sunbird or tiger. You've got the option for either one. We're going to lift that left leg behind us. This is sunbird. We can stay right here. I'd like us to keep our hips level. This is going to strengthen your glutes, or if you'd like to try something that's going to give you a little more back extension, we can extend that right arm, reaching, coming back, finding that ankle, and lifting. And let's breathe here. If you're in sunbird, those glutes are probably starting to really kick in and work. If we're in tiger, we want to feel a stretch in that hip flexor. Holding the movement, never holding the breath. You'll notice in the practice, the further we go into our practice, the longer our holds are. At the beginning, it's one breath, one movement. Then we start to hold things for 3 to 5 breaths. And we can release that. Let's sink back into child's pose once more, finding neutral with the back after all that extension. Breathing. And we'll come back up to all fours. Drawing up that left foot. Once again, making a choice to either stay here in sunbird or to extend that right arm out, reaching, coming behind, finding the ankle, and lifting. Breathing, feeling an openness down that front of the body. And we can release that. Let's come into down dog. First shifting into plank to line everything up. And pushing the hips towards the ceiling, head hanging between the biceps. Finding neutral once again at the back. And we can drop our hips down. Let's grab a block. We're going to move into a restorative bridge. We're going to come onto the back. Now the block can be a lot of different heights. This is tall, medium, short. If you've never done a restorative bridge, go short. I'm going to go to this height here. I'm going to come onto the back, lifting the hips, and then settling them right on top of the block. This is great if you sit all day, if you've been traveling in the car. Let the arms come to the side, kind of roll those shoulders down. And then find a place with your feet where they just really have to work as little as possible. And then take a breath, exhale, and let go. The more you muscle this pose, the less it's going to be effective for you. Restorative yoga is all about being and letting go. Previous to this movement, our practice was full of movements where we're trying to stretch and reach and rotate and feel in those ways. But this is a form of yoga referred to as restorative yoga, where we allow the props to do the work. Sometimes that prop is gravity, sometimes it's a block. We're using a little bit of both here. The more that we let go, the more that we're going to feel this release of the low back. Let's just breathe here. I don't know if you've ever struggled like I have, wondering if God can use you. If we go back to the story of Tamar, I think one of the really exciting things about Tamar is that if you go to the New Testament, the book of Matthew, the very first chapter, he's going through the genealogies, the family history of Jesus. It's generally Israelites and men that are in these genealogies, but Matthew decided to throw Tamar in there. Tamar is a descendant of Jesus. And wouldn't you think that'd be somebody you might avoid? It's kind of a different story. She's a woman, she's not of a Hebrew descent. But no, Matthew throws her back in, throws her right in there, because Matthew doesn't hide the skeletons in Jesus's closet. He highlights them, and I think he's very purposeful in that, because if God can use somebody like Tamar in his story, he can use you. And now we can draw those arms closer to the torso, tiptoe those feet into a supportive place, take that block, lift the hips, and place the spine back down. Let's draw the knees in towards the chest, rock that out, just kind of like a little massage here. Bring the back to neutral again. Then we're going to extend that left leg out to be straight. We're going to take that right knee over to the left for a supine twist. Let's open up the arms and just try to wiggle those shoulders down towards the mat, taking our gaze towards the fingertips of the right and breathing. When we breathe in a twist, we have an opportunity to work on the intercostal muscles that surround the lungs. So the more we can come into this rotation, you might feel a little bit of a challenge to your breathing, and that's a good thing. That means that you're getting some good work there to your intercostal. So really work to get that breath. If you have to take sips of breath, do that. Notice every inhale you maybe feel a little light. Every exhale, let yourself just sink towards the floor. Our inhales are sending blood towards the blood and the lungs. They're activating the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight. And then when we exhale, we're doing the opposite of that. We're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what calms us back down. We spend a lot of time in our fight or flight. So really take advantage of these exhales. Lengthen them. Feel them. Let's take our hands, finding that right knee, drawing ourselves onto the back. Once again, coming into this little massage for the back with the knees towards the chest. Not doing a full-on wind relieving pose here. We're just trying to find neutral in the back. You don't want to go straight from rotation on the left to rotation on the right. Let's extend that right leg, drawing our left knee over towards the left, opening up the arms, working those shoulders towards the mat, taking our gaze over towards those fingertips, breathing. Noticing where in the back we feel this twist most. Is it the top of the back, the mid back, the low back? Just noticing. Feeling heavy on that exhale. And now let's take those hands over to assist, bringing those knees back to the chest, rocking it out once more. And we'll move into our final relaxation, a time of stillness. We can extend each heel towards the corner of the mat. Maybe you'd like to grab a pillow or a bolster to put under the knees to support your low back. Do whatever you have to do as far as fidgeting and wiggling to find stillness. We were created for stillness. We're told to honor the Sabbath. We're many times told to be still. So give yourself permission for this time of stillness. We're going to take our last purposeful breath of today, inhaling, exhaling, and then just let yourself breathe without really thinking about it. How awesome it is that we were created in a way that we breathe without even thinking about it. And yet at the same time, as part of our autonomic nervous system, we can't control our heartbeat, but we can control our breath, and we can use it to calm ourselves down. Notice how heavy we feel on every exhale. Let's relax the shoulders. Whatever you've been carrying, just imagine releasing that to Jesus. Let that burden go. He's not asking you to carry it. He's asking you to let him carry it. We're softening the neck, allowing the chin to drop and the teeth to feel loose, finding the same softness in the cheekbones, the space under the eyes, the crinkles where we smile, finding a softness across the top of the forehead, every follicle of hair resting. Let's relax the right arm, the left arm, the inside of both elbows, the left wrist, the right wrist. Is there anything we've been hanging on too tightly to? Just imagine that releasing out of the hands. Taking our attention to the heart. Letting go of any bitterness, any anger. Noticing the firmness of the rib cage and choosing to allow our heart to be full of kindness, love, joy, and peace. Allowing the hips to sink into the floor, softening the right leg, the left leg, our shins, the calves, the right ankle, the left ankle. Ephesians 6 speaks of the shoes of peace. Imagine placing those on. Noticing the state of calm. Now we can take a more purposeful breath, maybe wiggling the fingers or toes, maybe reaching those arms overhead like when we yawn in the morning, coming to a seated position. You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your Father in heaven. Thank you for practicing with me today.